Sup y'all, welcome to my spoiler discussion for Avengers Endgame. I already put up my sort of raw thoughts about the movie that was spoiler free. That's up right now, but I really couldn't talk about anything about the movie because they're about obviously very spoiler sensitive stuff in Avengers Endgame. But now here in this discussion, I'm going to get deep into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, you shouldn't be anywhere near this video because we're going to get deep into the nitty gritty when it comes to this movie right here. It may end up being the longest review I've ever done, but it's necessary because there's a whole lot of stuff to talk about when it comes to this movie and just the future of the MCU in general. As I mentioned in my Raw Thoughts review, this movie, the marketing campaign was very secretive when it came to the stuff that they showed. They showed really the bare minimum to pique people's interest. They were really just more of announcement trailers to show that, hey, we got Avengers 4, Avengers Endgame coming. Y'all saw Infinity War. You want to see how the story concludes with this movie right here. And like I said, they didn't show anything, but when you see this movie and how everything plays out, they really did it for a reason, because the way this movie story is told, just the story in general, really no way you could really market it without sort of spoiling sort of the surprises in terms of the events, mainly the whole sort of time travel element, the characters they encounter, all that stuff. You really couldn't do that. Even the dynamic with Thanos, which I didn't know how he was really going to play into this movie, you really couldn't spoil what they did with him, because obviously it's the past version of himself that's the real villain. So that would have been a big spoiler if they put that in the trailers right there. Talking about this movie, the best way to talk about it would be sort of a chronological flow in terms of the events in the movie from beginning to end. Let's start off with the beginning of the movie with Hawkeye's family. That was really good stuff. It's a good way to start things. But in this movie in general, just started really fast. You get right into the whole thing with Tony and Nebula in the Milano. And this movie, I thought the whole thing with Tony in space, I thought that would take maybe like 30 minutes to like an hour of him just there, just waiting. But no, right after that, we got Captain Marvel on her way to sort of save him. He sees that light. And just speaking about Captain Marvel real quick, this movie, I don't know, I think that character just has a whole lot of work to do when it comes to making her a likable character. She's really not all that likable. There's just not a whole lot to that character. She's just sort of an overpowered, like just sort of blah, whatever. I mean, cool powers for sure, but that doesn't make you a great character. And speaking about Captain Marvel, the way that she finds Tony and then her sort of introduction to the Avengers, that mid-credit scene in the Captain Marvel movie, what is that all about? That mid-credit scene in that movie has nothing to do with anything. I've never seen that before, where just a blatant deleted scene was the mid-credit scene, which you thought was going to be in the next movie, but it's not in this one at all. So I really don't know what they were thinking with that mid-credits Captain Marvel scene. I was all like, that's weird. But anyway, getting on to the story now. Tony and all them come back to Earth. Earth is obviously now a shithole now because of the whole events of the snap. Half the people gone. And it was cool to see Tony come back, reunite with everyone, Cap, Black Widow, all the Avengers, all that stuff. Then you got Rocket that's on the team right now. It was cool how he called him a Build-A-Bear. Really cool dynamic between those two. I wish we got to see more interaction between Tony and Rocket. That was really cool. That sort of emotional breakdown scene Tony has with Captain America, where he's sort of telling him off. That was a really sort of emotional part right there, and great acting by Robert Downey Jr. And just the effects to make Tony look like all sickly and skinny, and he's getting that IV. It's just like, man, this guy is like really fucked up. Just like, oh my goodness. But I guess spending all that time in deep space will do that to you. But then amazingly, really quickly, they were able to locate Thanos. They go to his planet. This movie showed that in terms of the strongest Avenger, there's really no competition between Captain Marvel and Thor. Captain Marvel is just like so damn overpowered because she's the one just leading the charge. Like, okay, let's go kill Thanos like that. She's all like, I don't need a team. You guys are helping me. So they go down to Thanos. They sort of do what they should have done, a better version of Star-Lord's plan, where they just chop his arm just clean off, strangle him. But apparently he doesn't have the stones anymore. He got rid of them because Thanos, he's got reason behind what he's doing. He's not evil just for the sake of being evil. He just wanted to wipe out the population to sort of benefit everyone in sort of his own sick sort of way. So he got rid of the stones so he wouldn't be tempted to do any more. And Thor, he just got mad, just really mad at Thanos and just chopped his head off. And the whole theater was all like, whoa. And sort of an interesting thing that they did was that then they played the music that was the ending score to Infinity War, when Thanos was just sitting there smiling. And it was almost like that's the end of the movie. Someone in the theater actually kind of laughed, the theater I was in, just like, well, I guess that's it. Then you see on the screen 5, and it's all like, what's going on here? And it says 5 years later, and it's all like, whoa. Like, that's a dynamic with this movie I had no idea what was going. I thought this was just going to be sort of a direct continuation, sort of a straight line path in terms of the ending of Endgame, just going into the ending of Infinity War, then going into this movie. But to do 5 years later, that was a really cool dynamic. And then you just see how everyone is doing. Cap and the Black Widow, they're still managing the Avengers facility. And then you got that whole sort of World Council thing with War Machine, Rocket, Okoye still in Wakanda. Then Captain Marvel, really the most notable thing about her, she's got a new haircut. That was kind of interesting. It's her comic book haircut, that sort of tomboyish cut, short look that she's got. Looked interesting, but I think for the purposes of, I think she looks better with the long hair, to be honest. But it was an interesting look for her. We'll see if she's got it in her next solo movie coming up. You see Tony, he finally fulfilled sort of that dream he had in Infinity War. Him and Pepper, I guess, are married now. And then we got to see him have a kid. That was great to see Tony Stark just settle down. Really good stuff between him and his daughter. I really loved that, how he was able to find some happiness. So like, well, I fucked up, but maybe I can still make the most of what I have in front of him. Really good arc for him in this one. Stuff with him, Pepper, and his daughter, and how even though he came back to the team, he's all like, hey, by all costs, I can't lose my daughter. I can't lose what I built, because he really was able to find his happiness, and that was great stuff. Hulk, or Bruce, he's now Professor Hulk. That was great because it allows Bruce to be really a member of the team, because Bruce and Hulk are sort of different entities. So the fact that they're able to combine the two and you're still able to get Bruce, but now he's actually can really be a hero, that was really cool also. And then the thing with Thor being fat. You got New Asgard and Valkyrie's there, Korg's there, and Meek's there. And then when Bruce and Rocket go to visit him, you see just Thor with the long hair. It's like, oh, he just got his long hair back. But nah, he's just a fat fuck now. That was just like, oh my god. Because they're always getting shirtless scenes with Thor, and the ladies love that. Then you get the shirtless scene in this one. It's just like, god damn, that's crazy. But obviously the linchpin to everything happening is Ant-Man coming back. And really, actually, the hero of this movie is that rat. Because had that rat absolutely not started the whole machine in Ant-Man's van, Ant-Man would have never have come back, and really everything in this movie would not have happened. We would just still be living in that post-snap world. But thanks to that rat, Ant-Man comes back. And the first thing I thought of was like, oh man, 5 years later, you imagine just being stuck floating in that quantum realm for 5 years. Then he goes back and sees the world as all this big whole shithole, and it's just like, oh man. But then you realize he says that even though it's 5 years in real time, the outside world, for him it was only 5 hours, which me, I was all like, oh thank God, because that would have been really bad to be stuck in there for 5 years. That would just be torturous. But the fact is it's just 5 hours, he's all like, hey, I got a way to solve things. And it was really sort of a different side to Scott Lang that we really haven't seen before. He's always been this jokey, kind of funny character. When he comes back, he's like sort of serious. He's like, whoa, what the hell's going on here? We got to make things right. And the stuff with his daughter, seeing her 5 years later, it was really sweet how the first thing he went to look at was to see if his daughter vanished. I was like, okay, he's being like a real character now, and not just sort of the comedy hero, which he's been in his previous movies. So then that leads to the whole time travel dynamic, the whole solution to sort of solve everything. They sort of convince Tony to sort of do it. Well, actually, no, Tony, he sees they tell Tony to do it. He doesn't want to do it. Then it was that picture of Spider-Man that gets him like, oh man. And when they show that picture of Tony and Peter Parker, it was at Stark Industries, and the whole theater was just like, oh, because it's really sort of a really sweet dynamic between the two. He's really the son that he never had. And Peter, he obviously sees Tony as that father figure. Great dynamics between them in Homecoming and Infinity War. And yeah, that was really the catalyst to bring Tony, well, actually the catalyst to bring Tony back in the team. So yeah, like I said, they bring the whole time, Tony builds the whole time travel thing and the time travel theories by Ant-Man. And time travel in this movie, now look, this isn't a problem with the quality of the movie, but time travel can be really messy if you don't handle it correctly. In this movie, even though, you know, you don't want to get too nitpicky, the way it's handled in this movie is just really kind of sloppy. And I'm mainly talking about the way how you go back and you majorly change events of the past, and how it's not having sort of a direct effect on the events of the future, the present day. Really doesn't make a whole lot of sense, because they changed some major stuff to where it's all like, okay, this should really change the course of events in your present day future. And that doesn't make sense. And the stuff with Thanos, his past self not avenging the future self, is just like, what's exactly going on here? So time travel, it's a really sort of tricky thing to pull off. And this movie, I mean, you can't complain about the science, but just the way it's handled and things that logically don't make sense. I don't know. I don't think it was handled the best in this movie in terms of the logic and sort of things not affecting the other things as they should, in my opinion. But even with this messy dynamic, it was still really cool to see them go back and visit the events of previous MCU films. We got to see Avengers 1, Thor the Dark World, Guardians Volume 1, and it was really cool to see sort of a different dynamic or perspective to these films, especially Avengers 1, when they show after the Battle of New York, and you get to see sort of the behind the scenes, like the Hydra guys coming in, Hulk having to take the stairs. That was really funny. The stuff with Loki and him just being like, oh God, just get me out of here. That was really cool stuff, how they showed the behind the scenes of all that. And then these sort of past scenarios, going back into the past, led to us seeing some characters that I definitely never thought that we would see ever again in MCU movies. You got the Hydra guys back now with Crossbones, and then Alexander Pierce. I never thought Robert Redford, we'd see him again in another MCU movie. That was really cool to see. Then you had the Ancient One in New York during the New York battle. And that's really cool how they showed that, because it's like, okay, her sanctum would still be in New York at the time. So it was cool how they showed her defending and show that, okay, she's not a part of the Avengers or the giant MCU in general, but obviously this is what would happen if we saw what was going on with her during the Battle of New York. And then the stuff on Asgard, showing Thor's mom, that was a really, really sweet one, because she's been gone, obviously, for a while. And to see Thor, just see like, oh my God, that's your mom. You would sort of have the same reaction he had, because he's lost so much. And to get to see your mom again, that one chance, that was really cool stuff all. And him sort of helping him out, giving him that pep talk, telling him to eat a salad. That was great stuff. Then they showed Jane Foster. And the thing with Jane Foster, it's unclear if that's sort of new footage they made for this movie. If it was new footage, that was a really short day of work for Natalie Portman. Had no lines whatsoever. It might have just been a deleted scene from that movie. It's unclear. But it was still cool to see Jane Foster pop up in some way. I know a lot of people didn't like that character, that dynamic between Thor and her. But I don't think they should have just dropped her off when she was such an important part of Thor 1 and 2 and Thor's life in general. And speaking about Thor getting to see his mom again, Cap and Iron Man definitely got their moments also when after they fuck up their whole New York plan. They go back to the 70s to the original Avengers facility, and then or Shield facility, I should say. And then Iron Man, he gets to see Tony gets to see his dad again. That was a great dynamic between those two, really heartfelt, because Tony's obviously had some daddy issues. For him to get to see his dad again, that was really cool stuff. And then Cap got his brief moment just seeing Peggy. He obviously couldn't go talk to her because that was really fuck up the whole mission. But yeah, him seeing her and just wanting to talk, but he can't. That was really sweet also. We'll get more in between those two later on. And then there's the search for the Soul Stone with Black Widow and Hawkeye. And yeah, when they said that we're going to go get all these stones back, bring them back, you forgot about the whole dynamic with the Soul Stone. So yeah, it's Black Widow and Hawkeye end up going to go get it. And well, yeah, we all know what happened with the Soul Stone with Thanos and Gamora. And as soon as Red Skull lays out that scenario, all like, oh no, this ain't going to go well. And so both of them end up wanting to make the sacrifice. And sort of an interesting thing to show about their characters is like, no, I'm going to do this, because they both care about each other a lot and both want each other to live. And both of them so willingly want to make that sacrifice really shows that these really are some good friends and just some good people in general. And the fact that they're sort of fighting each other, and you think like, okay, he's got the upper hand, he's going to do it. Oh no, now Black Widow's got the upper hand. She's going to do it. Then Hawkeye seems like he finally gets the upper hand and that he's going to jump to do it. And like willingly, like, haha, I got you, I'm going to do it. And then Black Widow's all like, nope, got you one more time. And then they end up hanging from that cliff. And then at that moment, you realize, oh man, Black Widow, she's going to go. And yeah, she ends up going. She was one between her and Hawkeye, I predicted Black Widow would die in this movie. Obviously not from the Soul Stone, but I figured that she would die instead of Hawkeye, because Hawkeye still got that family, the whole family dynamic. They'd keep him around, want to have a happy ending. And Natasha, they really showed her early on that she was really broken from all this. She just wanted some way to make things back. She seemed definitely one of the most determined out of the whole group to sort of set things right. And so I guess that's why she wanted to make that sacrifice. She just wanted that one moment, one chance to make things right. And yeah, the character obviously had a hell of a run. Props to Scarlett Johansson, to all she's brought to the MCU. Now she's got a movie coming up, and I called it that. All the rumors that was going to be a prequel film. So that's why I'm all like, well, they still could kill her in this one. Sure enough, they did. R.I.P. Black Widow. You meant a lot to the Marvel Universe, and thank you for all that you've done. Now, all this time tampering ends up leading eventually to the return of Thanos, because of the fact that you had the two nebulas in the year 2014 the sort of psychic link between those two makes Thanos realize, uh-oh, something's going wrong. And that this whole thing made just made me like, man, Thanos, he's just like this force that you can just not get rid of. As he says at the end of the movie, he's inevitable. And the fact that even the past version of himself, before he even gets one stone, was obviously able to piece all this stuff together in terms of the events of the future, his future self, and him coming up with this new plan, really just made him just an amazing villain, just as good a villain as he was in Infinity War, and maybe even better, just because, like I said, this is the version of himself that has not experienced all of this. But the fact that he was able to put all this together and still come up with this plan and realize, you know what, y'all just so ungrateful. I'm going to come up with an even better plan. I'm going to wipe everything out. And then we're going to start life a whole new with no one knowing what's going on and how I remade the universe. So obviously the stakes get upped in this one because he's just so angry at the original Avengers for ruining his plan in the future. Talking about how he got this from the two nebulas. The whole dynamic with the two nebulas, that was really cool also. And it was really a cool way to see how far nebulas come as a character through Guardians 1, and then you see her evolve in Guardians Volume 2, and then Infinity War, and then how she is in this one. Really cool stuff also. And then getting to have the past version of Gamora there, getting to see her dynamic and how she was always wanted to sort of betray Thanos, and then you get to see how she sort of convinces, teams up with the present day Nebula and trying to convince the past Nebula. That was really emotional stuff too, and I really love the dynamic between Gamora and Nebula, and hopefully we see more of it in Guardians Volume 3. Eventually, this all leads to the giant battle outside of Avengers facility. The two nebulas end up swapping. Thanos swaps the two nebulas, and she ends up bringing back Thanos to the present day world to sort of get the gauntlet and sort of do the snap all over again. And like I said, just a really cool plot by Thanos, and definitely something I didn't see coming at all. And yeah, obviously there's that battle between the Trinity, the Marvel's Trinity, Iron Man, Cap, and Thor versus Thanos. That was a really cool battle also. And then obviously the major moment was Cap getting Thor's hammer. That's obviously something that's happened in the comics. And then when you get to see it in this one right here, it's just like, oh man, Cap, he was using that hammer pretty well, using it, bouncing it off the shield, doing a whole bunch of stuff. Really cool. But Thanos, man, you just cannot stop him. And then the moment where he's sort of pounding and breaking Cap's shield, and just seems like he has Cap on the ropes. I'm like, okay, this is it. This is where Cap is finally going to die. I predict Cap is going to die in this one. Then you get that call from Falcon, and it's all like, oh, here comes Falcon. And not just him. Here comes the moment that I think Marvel fans have just been dreaming for years, and that is every hero, all the heroes from the MCU just coming together for this grand battle. The first one to come back was Black Panther. He got a huge applause, and you saw Spider-Man, Scarlet Witch, all these heroes, the Wasp. It was great to see her come as part of the Avengers team. Then the Guardians came, and then a really sort of interesting dynamic that I don't know if people have noticed, but I definitely noticed this. I was clapping when all the heroes came back. You see all of them one by one come back. Then Star-Lord came back, and I actually was all like, I stopped clapping. And you know what? I think a lot of the people in my theater stopped clapping also, because obviously with him, he's sort of the reason everything went wrong, because they had Thanos beat. And obviously he fucked up majorly Infinity War by sort of getting emotional. So people, if you go back and watch the movie with an audience within the next few weeks, the part where Star-Lord comes up, I'm betting, at least for my theater, people stopped clapping when he popped up. And rightfully so, because he sort of fucked up. Even though we still like Star-Lord, he's still going to have to take a while to redeem himself from what he did in Infinity War. It was interesting the part where he sort of sees the 2014 Gamora, and he's like, oh shit, Gamora, is that you? And obviously she still has no feelings for someone like Star-Lord, and she's all like, this is who I hook up with. So I'll be curious to see the dynamic with those two going forward. I'll talk about that later on in the video. But then just getting back to the final battle going on. Amazing final battle with everyone showing what they can do. Everyone sort of passing the gauntlet on. Like, okay, Spider-Man, I've got it. His reuniting with Tony Stark. That was a heartfelt moment. Then Black Panther doing what he can do. Shuri was there also. That was cool. Doctor Strange talking to Tony about the whole scenarios. That was interesting. This whole battle, but everyone, Thanos, Wasp, her and Ant-Man together. That was really cool to see how those two really are a thing now. I love that. And he was so happy to see Wasp and Hope come back. That was great. And then Captain Marvel comes through to sort of bring that sort of take down Thanos' ship that's up above and sort of wreak havoc on everything going on. And amazingly, when Captain Marvel came back, I was like, oh shit, I forgot about her. Like I said, I didn't really miss her just because I don't want to harp on her too much because I didn't think her movie was terrible. I gave it a decent review. I just don't think at this point she's really not all that good of a character. And she comes down, does her whole overpowered thing. The noticeable thing about that part was the whole thing, the scene with the MCU ladies coming forward. Spider-Man's all like, I don't know what I can do with this, and all the ladies come through, including Pepper, who's got her Pepper Potts, who's got her own suit that can do all sort of cool stuff. That was cool. We got to see her fight with Tony briefly. But like I said, that whole MCU ladies part, that was actually kind of cool to see, even though I know a whole lot of anti-feminists gonna look at that scene and go like, what the hell is this? But it was still a cool dynamic to see all the ladies, well, most of the ladies from the MCU doing their thing. Although it was sort of laughable to see Mantis there. I'm all like, well, what is she gonna do? Is she just gonna blindly go like, don't touch me, and just sort of put people to sleep? But regardless, still cool to see that MCU ladies scene and all the stuff they did with Valkyrie, her doing her thing, the Wasp, and see Captain Marvel just steamrolling through everyone. That was cool stuff. And this eventually leads to that final stand with Thanos. Captain Marvel, she shows that she really is powerful, going toe to toe with Thanos, and it eventually looks like, oh man, Thanos has no chance. But eventually uses that Power Stone to sort of get her to knock her away. Then it's up to the Trinity, the Marvel Trinity, to fight her again. Then obviously this leads to the whole thing with Tony Stark. Now the part with Tony Stark, when he was talking to Doctor Strange about, yo, is this one of the scenarios that we win? And Strange is all like, I can't tell you that, man. At that part, I knew that, this isn't going to end well for Tony Stark. Because that's like, okay, that's some foreshadowing that means something major is going to happen with him. Then there's that moment he looks at Tony Stark before Tony Stark goes in to fight Thanos. Then he goes with this whole one-on-one Thanos again. Thanos thinks he's got the gauntlet, but Tony reveals like he's got all the stones in his glove. Thanos is about to snap. He realizes, he says, I am inevitable. He realizes he doesn't have it. Then Tony's all like, nope, I got it. Then he says, I am Iron Man. Really cool, because that's the closing line he gave in Iron Man 1. And he said it again in Iron Man 3. But these actually ended up being his last words. And I guess that was kind of cool and kind of poetic. It ended up being that way. Snaps his fingers, and then everyone from Thanos' army ends up disappearing. Finally, with Thanos himself, he realizes, shit, I actually lost this one. And yeah, he gone, disappears away, ending the rule of the Mad Titan once and for all. But then we cut to Tony Stark, and Tony Stark, his whole, I guess his right side of his body is just all fucked up. Because remember in Infinity War when Thanos did the snap, really fucked up that side of his body, his arm, and it was just like, oh, and he's really powerful. Tony, obviously being immortal, could not survive that blast, and he's just like there on the ground. You guys see all those cracks on that side of his skin, the purple energy going through him, and it's just like, oh man, this isn't going to go good. And then Peter Parker, he's always bringing out the feels. He's just looking at Tony and just like, no, Mr. Stark, no, come on, man, just get up. Just that father and son relationship. I love that so much. It's so damn emotional. Then Pepper's just all like, and Tony, it's okay, man. You can rest now. And just really, really sad moment because Tony Stark is the one that started all the heart of the MCU. And obviously he's the one that's just been on all these adventures. We've journeyed with him for over a decade now. And I thought it would be a really ballsy decision, take some real brass cojones to kill Tony Stark. And sure enough, they ended up doing it in this movie right here. And you know what? Even though it's not something I predicted and generally just not something I wanted just because I love Tony Stark so much, really sort of a fitting end just because he's the one that started this journey. And Thanos is gone, our main villain from this saga, and now he's gone. It fits and it definitely was emotional. And then you get that funeral, then the thing Pepper gave him from Iron Man 1. This is proof that Tony Stark has a heart, that arc reactor, the funeral service they have him with all the Avengers there, dressed in black, everyone mourning for him. Great stuff, because Tony Stark definitely deserves it. And obviously, we're not going to see him in the future in any more MCU films. And then just that projection he left for his daughter and Pepper, just great stuff. Tony Stark has just come a long way as a character since we saw him in that cave in Iron Man 1. And obviously, he was cocky as shit in Iron Man 2. But to see his journey since then and the man he became to be, magic props to Tony Stark, and thank you for Robert Downey Jr. for portraying Tony Stark and just being the perfect hero that we could have asked for in the MCU. That was great stuff. And during the credits scene, when obviously they're going through everyone and they save him for last fittingly, he got a huge applause, and I was definitely applauding too, just like, thank you, Tony. Thank you for everything you've done. Thank you, Robert, for everything you've done for this franchise. Then there's a few other loose ends that they wrap up after Tony Stark's funeral. Then there's a thing with Thor and Guardians. Thor, he realizes, you know what, I've sort of played my part in life. He leaves Valkyrie to sort of rule over New Asgard. So New Asgard on Earth. So that's going to be an interesting dynamic with her. Who knows if we'll ever really see her again. Valkyrie, I didn't really like her so much in Ragnarok, but eventually as that movie got on and then into this movie, definitely like her more as a character now. So we'll see if they do anything more with her going forward. But then Thor, amazingly, decides, you know what, I'm just going to go off and chill with the Guardians now. Now, before we saw that, we saw Quill, before Thor came onto the Milano, we saw Quill sort of searching for Gamora, looking for a trace. And I think that's a tease to show that she is still out there somewhere. Because she didn't die, well, because she didn't die because of the snap, she died because of the Soul Stone. So there's got to be some kind of dynamic with her that she can come back. But sort of something interesting that was not addressed was what exactly happened to the 2014 version of Gamora. Watching the movie, I definitely don't remember her getting finger snaps. And then my friend told me that she wasn't there at the funeral service for Tony Stark at the end of the movie. All the other Guardians were there, but she wasn't there. So 2014 Gamora, it's all like, well, what really are they going to do with her? Because I was thinking, I was all like, is she going to be part of the new team now? And it's going to be a dynamic where Peter has to fall in love with her all over again, or she has to fall in love all over with him, because it's a 2014 version of herself before she's even met him and gone on these adventures with the Guardians. So that's going to be a big thing. The big hook for Guardians Volume 3 is sort of searching for the present day Gamora, the Gamora that died because of the Soul Stone. And what they do with the 2014 Gamora, or what exactly happened, not exactly clear, but definitely looking forward to Guardians Volume 3 now. It is interesting, though, with Thor. I thought that he would die in this movie just because I'm not really sure what else you can do with that character now. But he's going to be going along with Guardians, and obviously there's an interesting dynamic with him being fat and just sort of kind of lazy and stuff like that now. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Thor going forward. But yeah, Guardians Volume 3 is going to be very interesting regardless of what they do. And there's the ending with Captain America and him going to return the stones, him saying, yo, don't worry, I'll be right back. Then they sort of trying to bring him back after he leaves. And then it's all like, Bruce is all like, uh-oh, what the hell's going on? Falcon's telling him to fix it. Turns out Steve had his own plans to sort of live out his own life after he returned the stones. He went and had his life with Peggy. That sort of happy ending, got to live that real life he always wanted, because that's what Tony said he always should do, is just find some of that good life. I believe that's what he called it. And yeah, did some good de-aging aging effects on Steve Rogers. That was really good. It looked like the same kind of stuff they did with Peggy in The Winter Soldier. So that was cool stuff. Also, an interesting and something I never would have thought of this way to sort of end Captain America. He obviously doesn't die, but I think what will happen in the movies in between, or when they do that Disney Plus show with Falcon and Bucky, he'll die off in between then, is what I'm guessing. So yeah, Steve Rogers had a hell of a run, but we're obviously not going to see him as the Steve Rogers we all know and love in this movie. But that does it in terms of the wrap-up of all the sort of spoilers and stuff like that in this movie. There's a whole lot to cover. Ultimately, this was just an amazing movie experience right here. It was everything I could have asked for in terms of a story like this, and continuing on what Infinity War left us off on. Had a whole lot of predictions that I was wrong about, but in the end, it didn't really matter, just because the movie experience, the pacing, all that stuff, just really great. I didn't want it to end. I know it's a 3-hour movie, but goddamn, I didn't feel that pacing, because when you're in there with characters and just a story that you love, that can just fly by. And just so for everything the MCU is built up to at this point, yeah, sit your ass down for a 3-hour movie and just enjoy it, because that's what you get right here. So I'm still going to give this a 10 out of 10. Just an amazing movie experience, and something that I definitely thank the MCU for delivering to us. That's it for this spoiler discussion. A whole bunch to talk about. This is going to be definitely my longest review I've ever done. It was definitely worth doing, and thank you guys for watching.